Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good evening. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next hour here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in 310-441-0555. As it's been the last few shows I've had, everyone's attention is on Iran and what's happening in Iran. In some ways, even more attention is on Iran. I'm seeing more people commenting, non-Iranians as well, which is overall very, very good. But of course, we know that in Iran, the internet has been shut down. I don't know, at last count, 100 hours or something. It's been several days of no internet there, which unfortunately usually means there's going to be more brutality by the regime, which is what reports are telling us. I should also make it clear, I'll share what I know. I'm by no means a journalist in the sense of I have the most up-to-date information. So I'll just share what I've heard, but also just thoughts on that also. But I've heard reports of thousands of people have been killed already by the regime, including openly firing on unarmed protesters, which is just blatantly wrong in so many ways, even international law and all sorts of things. And just how can you do that? And doing that hundreds and thousands, and you've seen videos of families going to just piles of bodies and trying to find their loved ones, which is just devastating and heartbreaking. And then even being made to pay for the bullets that were used from some things that I've heard, which is just disgusting. So it just really, really heartbreaking what we're seeing. So it's the emotions that people are feeling are just extreme right now, because there's this extreme hope and potentially even joy of things looking like this could be the end. But then there's the devastation that we're seeing happening and lives being lost. And each time, even when I first spoke on this, the first reports were about 20, 30 people being killed. And even then, when I said it that way, I wanted to mention that when you say 20, 30, we're looking at statistics, sometimes we focus on the number or what that means in some kind of scale, but each one of those is an individual whose life was taken away. Each one represents a family who is devastated by the loss of a loved one and represents an injustice. So when we say 20 or 30, if it's 20, 21, 22, each one of those represents one human being, a lost life. And we don't want to lose sight of that. And now we're looking at it's in the thousands of those individuals, each one of them being significant. And I never want us to forget that, the cost of what is already going on, which is why we are so urging whatever can be, can happen to happen quickly, because the longer it goes on, we know the regime is cracking down, and that means more lives will be lost. But from what we're seeing, the Iranian people are incredibly brave, and despite all of this, are still in the streets and protesting and demonstrating and doing more than all that to make things happen, which is just incredible, unspeakable bravery. Just things that you can't imagine how they do that and continue to do that. Here in Los Angeles, reporting this is so, compared to what they're going through, is so minor, but I'm actually going to share it because of makes us think of the comparison of what that can be like. So I actually was able to attend the protest yesterday with my father, which was very sweet to walk with him amongst the people. I don't know the final numbers, but in the tens of thousands, maybe I heard 30,000, 40,000, whatever. I don't know the exact number, but it was a very big turnout at Los Angeles, which is wonderful. But as you might have heard, there was a tragic ending to it near the end of the time of the protest, a U-Haul truck rammed into several protesters. From what I've seen, latest was that there was just a few injuries, but thankfully no one was killed. But of course, very scary when you hear a truck going through an area like a protest where as I was just saying, thousands of people tightly packed in. So, you know, again, it's tragic that it happened. Could have been far worse as far as the results of people being hurt or even killed. And I also don't want to talk too much about who was the person, what happened, because there's still things that are coming out of what happened there. But regardless, when I heard the news, I actually did not see it. We were, I think, on Westwood Boulevard, and this happened on one of the side streets. The protests, we started and walked, and so people were all over the place against so many people. People were in different parts of the protest. And so when I found out, it was actually after we had left that this had happened. And of course, it makes you think, wow, we were so close to it. Could that have been us that was in that path or on, close to there? I'm thinking about my father, thought about bringing my son to the protest, but I didn't. And thinking about that, gosh, that's so scary, thinking, what if? And, it makes you think about, and of course, what was the person trying to accomplish? I don't know, but it makes people scared to go back. Some people already always, when you go to a crowded place, something that's politically charged, there's always this sense that could it be unsafe? Could something happen here? Is always something that does, I think, loom in the back of your mind. But as I was saying, to make that comparison, so I had this sense of, wow, that feels so close, even though we didn't even see it, but just because you were there and it happened, you could have been there easily. And it's scary, and the possibilities, all those things. And then it's to think, what are these brave, young, and of all ages, Iranian men and women doing in Iran, where what they're facing is 1,000, 1 million times that threat that I thought I was even close to or not close to, or a lot of us felt there. And it just gives you a glimpse of the just unbelievable courage, because you can't imagine, even still, obviously going through that doesn't make it anything close, but it just gives you a glimpse of the incredible courage of those people to know that what they're facing could even be death. We're hearing just horrible reports of hospitals being filled, and then even hospitals being raided by government forces to take protesters. You don't know what their purpose is or what their goal is. But knowing they're facing that and still going into that fire, not running away, going into that fire is really remarkable. And I think we are all applauding them, because it's just unspeakable to imagine what they're facing. And we hope it ends very soon, and hope it ends with no more lives lost, or at least the reduction of whatever in whatever way is possible. But we will see how things play out. So I think, to everyone who attended a protest, I saw lots of videos in Toronto, huge turnout. Cities in Europe, I saw a few that had big turnouts as well. That's great. No one step makes a revolution. And for those of us who are not in Iran, there is only so much we can do. We can't expect to do so much. But as I've mentioned already in previous shows on this topic, all you can do is all you can do. And we want to make sure you do that to the fullest amount, that you don't feel any regret that you could have done more. And even, yes, it could be something that seems as small as posting, but that is important, especially for a few reasons. One, of course, the internet shut down in Iran, where we know that messages are not getting out, or not getting out easily. So whatever gets out, we need it to be spread and shared, also, especially in the face of, we know that the government and its proxies and bots around the world are trying to spread misinformation about what is going on, to minimize the protests, to try to show videos that there's so many people that are pro the regime. Protests, I saw one video, very much an AI generated video. You can see people in the middle of a big flag, which doesn't make sense physically. Also a video being shared that was from 2020, that was being a big crowd gathering, but making it seem like this was a pro regime protest that was happening today. So, we're seeing a lot of misinformation out there, and people, for whatever reason, some I think just try to get attention, but some have really bad, well, that's bad enough, but even worse intentions of trying to, support the regime in their own ways, trying to seed doubt or create, these arguments that make it seem like, oh, if you're pro the regime being taken over, you're this kind of person or that kind of person. There's a lot of stuff out there. Unfortunately, there are so many types of wars, and one that always existed but now has taken a hyper speed level is the information war. That there is a lot of people that they don't mind just muddying the waters, making people a little bit confused. It's like, okay, you think the regime is bad, but maybe, okay, let's share some things like, some statistics about women and education in Iran, which I'm sure there's some of that, and we're very proud of our Iranian women and them achieving a lot despite the challenges that they have there. But that doesn't mean that women have equal rights there. They're far from it. To leave the country, they need permission from their husbands or need a chaperone, or they have to cover their hair. They have so many ways that their lives are restricted. So I'm seeing a lot of information and misinformation and people just trying to obfuscate and muddy the waters and make people confused. And so it's important that those of us that are supporting the regime change are very clear in posting the loud messages coming from the people of Iran and making sure that that gets broadcast, because the media, they are hearing these mixed messages, and sometimes, again, they might have their own bad intentions and reasons for doing it, but sometimes they don't know. They hear conflicting reports, or it sounds like conflicting reports, and they might think because of that things are not so clear. I've seen reputable news organizations posting some very false, misleading, misinformed headlines and articles about what's going on. So it might seem small to post on social media, but there is this information war, and we can all play our part to try to support that in the right direction and speak for our brothers and sisters in Iran who can't speak right now because of the internet shutdown, which somehow, the government can send out all of their stuff, but the people don't have internet. That's just clearly a sign that you don't want information to get out. You don't want images of what you're doing to be released and shared with the world. There's really no other way around it than to shut down the internet. So as small as it might sound, I hope you'll all do that part. As small as it might sound, if you go to a protest or not, I hope you will go. Those things do play a part when they show the images. It needs to be shown that this is something that has worldwide support and also will bring people's attention to it. Even yesterday, walking to the protest area and away from it, I saw several people just saying, "Oh, what is this protest for?" And then you tell them. We forget that for all of us, our eyes and hearts and emotions are so much on Iran. We think that everyone knows about it, but lots of people have no idea. They don't know what's going on. They don't even know this is a situation, and they don't know what that situation is. So we want to keep spreading information in whatever ways that we can, doing your part, whatever is our responsibility. As small as it might seem, all those small efforts together does make a big difference. Okay, let's go to our first commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been talking a lot about the situation in Iran, and in this segment, it's related to that, and something that I'm seeing that I think affects how people argue about what's going on, or even if they think they should support or be against something. And psychologically, what I notice is a factor that's playing a big part in all this is black and white thinking and our desire to see things in black and white, because that's much more comfortable than seeing things as they truly are, which is almost always gray and with some nuance. So what I mean by that is, for example, you'll see people say that, well, you shouldn't support this revolution because that means you support Israel or America, or you support monarchy versus democracy, or it means you're anti-Islam if you are anti the Islamic Republic of Iran. And all of these things to me fall under a very clear uh, generalization of trying to put things or see things in black and white, or maybe you see them as black and white. Again, sometimes these ideas are hijacked to try to push a certain narrative forward. But I think many people actually think in these ways genuinely, that they see things in such black and white that it makes, or they want it to be black and white, that it makes them miss the nuance or the reality of the actual situation. So it's very, very unfortunate that this is the case. And this is also fueled by the hyperpolarization that we see because of social media and the way it makes people feel that they have to 100% agree with one side or 100% disagree with one side or whatever it is. And so they have to believe everything about something or nothing about something, or they have to hate everything about something or like everything about something. And this is also very, very dangerous and gets us to really dark and bad places. But unfortunately, that's where we see ourselves going. We see this here in the United States with everything being so politicized and polarized that every conversation turns into an argument, or doesn't even become an argument because people can't even see close enough to have a meaningful discussion that's a meaningful argument or debate. They might just yell insults or negative things at each other, but they don't actually have conversations with any meaningful discourse. So we're seeing the same thing with what's happening in Iran, that people think, okay, well, if, a country I don't like is in favor of the regime change, then it must be a bad thing. And two things can be true at the same time. You might be in support of something and think it's good, and also someone you don't like might also think it's good or might be in favor of it. And that doesn't automatically make it a bad thing. But unfortunately, that's something that I'm seeing a lot in posts that people are putting online. So let's say, for example, this idea that if Reza Prince Pahlavi comes into power, that means you're supporting a monarchy, and that's anti-democratic. So you shouldn't want that. Whereas right now, theoretically, Iran has a democracy, which really doesn't. But maybe someone would say that, and then a similar type of group might also say that, and also it's Islamophobic to be against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which both of those are not good arguments at all, in my opinion. They're very just black and white, and seeing it just as something simplified and oversimplified rather than seeing the genuine what we're talking about in your life. So the thing with the Shah or Prince coming into power, or being part of the transition. And look, I should say, I thought that I know exactly how things will play out, that I know what's the exact right thing, what the consequences will be. Of course, you can't. So we can't, if we have to wait to know, kind of going back to this black and white thinking, then no one can say anything or do anything, because no one can say for a certain fact what is going to play out and what is the exact right thing. But for me, what I see is that when you have a movement or a revolution, I almost don't want to quote them because I don't know the person's name, and I saw a video where maybe it's a common analogy, but anyway, saying that when you're trying to put a spear into the heart of the enemy, you need it to have a point. It has to have one single point to make that piercing of the enemy. And so you do need that. And I think in previous movements that was not there. Even with Mahsa Amini, people were so angry, so upset. Of course, they already were upset for 44 years or so at that point of what was going on. But with what happened there and what women have always experienced in Iran under this regime, people were outraged. There was huge momentum. But I think there was a lack of a focal point that everyone could rally behind. And we saw unfortunately, a lot of disunity amongst the Iranians, at least the discourse I was seeing of what is the right next step, or I can't support this, or I will only support this side of things or that side of things. And it made a splinter and made the effect less strong, and unfortunately faded out, at least for then. I think what we're seeing now is still a carryover of that. It's all interconnected, but that was not so long ago. And I think that's still carrying over into what we're seeing today, that a lot of these brave Iranian individuals were part of those protests as well. They kind of know what this is like and the drill, and they're ready for it, and they're showing us how ready they are. But I don't think we had a central point, and because of that, there was far too much splintering and fracturing and disunity and calling each other, bad and wrong, even though you were on the same side. You had one big common goal, which was getting rid of this regime. But because we couldn't agree on the exact parameters of what should happen next, I think we lost that a lot of that momentum, and things fizzled out. So, is can I say 100% it's the right thing? There's nothing wrong with it. That there's no concerns? No. But do I think it's important to have a transitional um, mindset or transitional plan in place at some level? Yes. And we really don't have anything that I think is better at this point. And so it's not that we know that it can't go wrong or can't be wrong, but I do think it makes sense that you can support someone who even was, yes, Shah means king, that's monarchy. Uh, Even though he was his father's son who was the king, it doesn't mean that he will be king or has to be king, or that that has to be the next step. He can be someone who is important in the transition, may have a position of power. But from what I've heard him say, he's made it very clear that he supports democracy, and that's very important. Also, a secular democracy, so that it's not connected to the religion or run by the religion, clerics and people in power. And that brings me to that second argument, that if you are anti the Islamic Republic, or if you say you're anti the regime, it somehow makes you Islamophobic or anti Islam, which is not the case at all. I'm not a scholar on Islam, but from what I do know, a lot of what they're practicing in Iran, or the Islamic Republic practices, is not necessarily textbook from the Islam. They're definitely their own things that they're doing there. So it's not necessarily that if you're against them, you'd be against the religion. But even more than that, or at least in addition to that, I think if you're in America and if someone said, "Oh, do you want there to be the state to become a Christian state where it's run by the clergy of the church?" I think almost every American, or most Americans, I'm sure there's some that are very fundamentalist Christian, that might support that. But of any religion, I think most people would say absolutely not. I mean, it's a big part of the United States, and what the founding fathers put forward is separation of church and state. That is very important. So wanting a separation of church and state doesn't mean you're against a specific religion, if that's the religion that was in power or is being proposed to be in power, so you think this is not the right way for society to function, for a government to function. And so you are against that by definition. So one, you could be very against any religion being in power, not because you're against that religion, but you're against the religion having power. And on top of that, you can be against certain people who are part of a religion and claiming that that is what they're functioning under, but are doing bad things, which is what we're seeing in the Islamic Republic, is that they are doing horrible things to their own citizens. So it's not about being anti-Islam, it's about being pro-human rights, being pro-democracy, pro-separation of church and state. That could make you very clearly you can even love Islam, think wonderful things about it, be Muslim yourself, or have respect for the religion, but be vehemently against the Islamic Republic. They're not incompatible. And I think that's what I'm seeing, is that people are having a hard time holding two thoughts that might feel contradictory in their head at the same time. I'm not Islamophobic, but I'm also very against this regime and this Islamic regime, and want them out. It's not just the Islam part of it, it's any religion that most people are against. And it's also this type of regime that is ruling the way that they do is what people are against. And you can be totally against them, but not against Muslim people around the world. Some people are saying this is like you're calling out all Muslim people or against all of them. Absolutely not. There doesn't have to be anything like that. Again, I am not against Christian people or the religion of Christianity, but if they wanted to make America a Christian state, I would be 100% against it, no matter what. And again, any religion, I think that would not be the right thing. So I think it's unfortunate. This is something that I've seen deterioration of just critical thinking and making arguments. I think with what happens on social media, people just say provocative things, say things that are black and white and certain, and those things get way more attention than anything that is nuanced. And so, unfortunately, because of that, people think that these are the better ideas. It's just kind of like a capitalistic system where whatever idea becomes the most popular seems to be the best idea and the best types of ideas. But what we're seeing with social media is the types of ideas that become the most popular tend to often be very oversimplified, very black and white, overly confident, overly certain types of ideas get way more attention than anything that is balanced, nuanced, sees the gray, sees multiple sides of things, and not intentionally provocative or inflammatory. People just post things that gets a lot of attention without any concern about, is this real? Is it true? Does it contribute positively to discourse and understanding? Those things have relatively little value in this game that goes on in social media, where it's just about trying to get everyone to click what you have, to share what you have. And actually, if you say something that people hate, that'll get a lot of attention. And usually if people hate it, there's opposite sides of people that will love it, and you get a lot of attention that way. So I think, unfortunately, this leads to people really having a hard time thinking through things better. And these black and white arguments become very popular. But I think it's important for us to be aware that those black and white arguments rarely represent the whole truth of what is going on. And we have to be willing to sit with inconsistencies even within ourselves. I don't mean being hypocritical or being totally inconsistent or, believing whatever we want to believe to favor ourselves. But what I mean is things don't always fit into tight boxes. So you can be anti-monarchy, secular or a religious run, a theocracy, and be pro-regime change and even pro-Reza Pahlavi being that figurehead who makes the transition. It might seem like they're contradictory, but to me, they are not. And I hope we could think about these things in more nuanced ways and also not attack people for not seeing it exactly how we see it. It's not black and white in that way either, that even if you see it in a nuanced way that you think is the exact right way, that if someone doesn't see it that way, they are totally wrong or against you. You're going to have to make allies with people that see things at least a little bit different from you and sometimes very different from you when you're trying to make a big change like this. When we're talking about millions of people, a country of about 90 million people, and then everyone around the world, but especially those people in the country are the most important. When you have 90 million people and a small or a large portion of them wants to make some change, millions of people, they can't all think exactly the same. That's not possible. They can have one ultimate goal that can help them rally together. And in this case, that very much is true, ending the regime and ending their reign of terror. But you also sometimes need a focal point, which also not everyone will say is their favorite thing or they have no qualms or issues with it, but they might find that we need to unite around something to make change happen. All right, let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. I want to end the show, of course, again, all thoughts and eyes and hearts on Iran and seeing the people at the protests yesterday here in Los Angeles and around the world. It's whatever you experienced, I hope you were there and did your part in that way. But it was quite beautiful to see people of all ages there. And there's a diversity about Iran in general, but a diversity about this movement that I think is quite beautiful. And so I was talking about in the last segment that we don't want to think of things in black and white. It is our default. It's so much easier to think in that way. It feels nice. It feels clean. You can feel absolute. You can feel certain, and that reduces anxiety. Uncertainty is not a good feeling at all. Certainty feels very good. But unfortunately, it's a necessary evil that we have to face, that things are much more uncertain. So it's much more comfortable. It's easier on our brains to think in that way. You think about a movie when you're a kid, the movies are the good guy who's always good and the bad guy who's always bad. And it just makes it very easy. Always cheer for the good guy and they're all good and the bad guy is all bad. As you get older and you see movies with more depth, we see movies that have characters that are, say more three-dimensional, more well-rounded. The good guy has some bad sides to him too, or does some bad things, and the bad guy might be humanized a bit to see that he's not just some evil monster. There's more to him than that. And so that's really the reality of life. We'd like to think of things in this way, but it's just not the truth. Even psychologically, we talk about splitting. Sometimes we split people as all bad, or you have, the mom is good and the dad is bad, or the dad is good and the mom is bad, and all good and all bad. It's a lot easier way to function, and a lot of people do that. But it's a very primitive way to function because it's the simpler way, it's the easier way, but it's not the nuanced way or the more mature way. And so, the diversity of what I saw just yesterday, of course, all Iranians, but differing levels of speaking Farsi for sure, different ages, wide range. I saw babies, very, very cute little babies, and I saw elderly people there and everything in between. And, seeing people that just looked from different walks of life and experiences. And that's a wonderful thing. And this is part of the Iranian people's strength, is our diversity. We have people from all different types of physical background and appearances to, different dialects and languages, and even just Iran alone. And it has been a sign and a part of the strength of Iran to have that diversity. And diversity, it's this big buzzword, in politics, everything gets politicized. We see it a lot with DEI and, the left being pro-diversity and the right being not necessarily anti-diversity explicitly, but maybe they are at times, but more that, that shouldn't be a factor and all that. But diversity can be a strength. Again, I don't want to go to black and white where it's always a strength. So when people are diverse, well, first of all, a few things. When we talk about diversity, there could be diversity just like demographics, which is like, let's say, male and female, cultural background, those things, which is something. But what is usually more important is the cognitive type of diversity, or diversity of thinking or ideas that leads to a strength. That's one thing. So now often that comes with being from different demographics. Someone who culturally had a very different experience will have a different perspective from someone who had, their own experience different from that. So it usually does have a strong overlap, but it doesn't mean necessarily that, okay, we have, 3 Iranians, let's bring in a non-Iranian. It will definitely add to the diversity of perspectives, depends on a lot of factors. So that's one thing. But diversity, in and of itself does create some friction, because the more everyone thinks the same, is the same, it is easier. So I'm not saying that makes it better or what we should aim for, but it is something that makes sense and depends on what you have diversity on. But diversity can be tough when, let's say, all of a sudden you have a group of people and someone comes in and doesn't speak the same language as them. Doesn't just make it better. Oh, good, we have diversity. That's going to be a challenge. How do we now communicate where one person doesn't speak the same language as everyone else? We have to find some way. So, it could create challenges. And so when we have diversity, that's one very clear example of language where you literally can't communicate with spoken language with each other. But other ways, there could be cultural differences and people try to interact. Sometimes they see things different ways, think that something is disrespectful, and to another group it's normal. Expectations are different, all that stuff. So there are these types of challenges that can come up with diversity. But when we try to navigate through those and we accept those, we do see the benefit of having people with different skills, different talents, different abilities, different perspectives. Even when we look at science, sometimes people think of science as, okay, well, there's no bias in science because of the scientific method. But first of all, the scientific method itself is not something that's absolute, that can't get, that can't have any issues. Or people can try to follow it as an ideal, but doesn't mean that their methods and their means will have no bias. We've seen this in so many ways. An example I always use is when we look at medicine that, okay, first they thought, well, I'm giving these patients this medication and they got better. So the medication works. Well, they said, well, you have to compare it to other people because sometimes people get better anyway. Okay. So now you compare it to a control group that doesn't get the medication. You say, okay, good. It looks like the medication works because more of these people did better than the other group. Well, then we realized when you give people a medication, that in and of itself can make people think they're going to get better, a placebo effect. So that might lead to more of those people getting better or contributing to that. Okay, so now we're going to give a placebo to the control group where they'll get some kind of sugar pill that doesn't have any active medication ingredients in it. So they think they're taking something. Everyone thinks they're taking something, and we can compare. And then we realize that, oh, wait, if the doctor knows who got the real medicine and the fake medicine, they might treat them differently. They might want the results to be a certain way. Unconsciously, they might even see things a certain way. And so we see that what we thought was objective from the beginning and appeared to be lacked a lot of objectivity or needed to overcome a lot of biases along the way. So science is ideally unbiased or tries to be as objective as possible, but it's being done by human beings. And so because of that, is always going to have bias. It always has a perspective. There's no view from nowhere. No matter how you look at an issue, you're looking at it from somewhere. You're looking at a house, you might think, okay, well, the front of the house is the neutral view, but of course, that's not the case. You can see it from so many different angles, and from whatever angle you see it, you're missing so much of the house. And so humans are doing science, so it's going to have bias in there. One of the things that can help overcome the bias, of course, there's the vigilance and people trying to be aware of the bias to make it more objective and to try to approach that ideal of objectivity or perfect objectivity, which never is achieved, but it's an ideal that you strive towards. One of the things that can help in the process of science is to have diverse opinions. So people bring in their biases that they don't even know about. Some they might be aware of and try to counterbalance or counteract, but many that you don't know about. And because of that, it can be helpful to have people from different perspectives that will kind of, again, it doesn't eliminate or erase all the biases, but it can help reduce them altogether. When different people with different biases come together, they can help each other see things more completely together as well. And so this is how in science we see diversity being a strength. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean diversity of just characteristics or demographics, but of perspectives, which might overlap with those things, but isn't one and the same. And so similarly with what's happening in Iran or with any type of movement, we need diversity. In some ways, if everyone thought the exact same way and felt the same exact way, that would be smoother. It would make it easy. Everyone wants the same thing. We'd become like these almost like robots, one big human body all working together easily, or I should say, not just working together without any communication. We'd already just be thinking and feeling the same things. That would be easier. But the reality is that's not the reality. That never will be the reality, that when you have millions of people, they'll all think and feel the same way. It's just impossible. So what we want to try to do is to make sure our diversity acts as a strength rather than a weakness or something that causes disunity. And we actually have unity with that diversity, or in that diversity, that people have different strengths and abilities. That's actually a very good thing, that you can utilize all of those. People might have different perspectives. That could be kind of tough because initially it leads to some type of conflict or lack of cohesion, that you're all going exactly in the same direction. But the good things with that diversity is that if it is able to be communicated and discussed, we can get to a better place. When we hear the different ideas and the different perspectives, yes, it takes some negotiating and navigating that, but you actually get to a stronger place rather than when everyone thinks the same thing, when it goes unchallenged. That actually doesn't lead to creating the best type of anything that you're talking about. We need that to test it in that way, and we can test it with one another. What helps is when we do have a clear goal, or at least a similar goal with each other that we're all working towards. Then we can all push towards the same thing, knowing we have good intentions, similar intentions of where we're trying to go, or at least what our next goal is. But we might have some different ways of how to do it, or what that means, or what to do about it, which is to be expected. So here with what is happening in Iran, you can't expect everyone thinks exactly the same way. And that's what people sometimes even post. All Iranians want this. And I get it. We're trying to make a message come across that this is what we're going towards. But that just is another fiction that everyone feels this way. They don't. You can say the majority do or many do or things like that. And as I was saying in the previous segment, I think when we're trying to support a movement, when we're trying to make some huge change happen, we have to accept that we're going to have to align ourselves with people that might disagree with us on some ways, even some ways that we might think are significant, or you might have to go about it in a way that's not your ideal way, but it might be that this is the way that makes the bigger goal happen, even if it doesn't happen the way you want it to. And I think many people might find themselves in that place that they might be reluctant to give their support because they think it means they support, for example, monarchy, if that is the way that things are going, of bringing Reza Pahlavi as the figurehead and the transitional leader in whatever capacity. They might think that that goes against what they believe. But again, life is not so cut and dried and easy. Sometimes it's that you want to stop the violation of human rights. You want to stop immense suffering. And it might not be in the clean way that you think is the best way. It might be a little bit messier than that. That's usually how movements are, revolutions are. Whenever you look at another aspect I should mention is, some people say, oh, look at these extreme people having the extreme ideas. That means the idea is bad. Every movement in human history has had extremists in it, and every movement going forward will. Because there always will be people, any movement that's big enough. If you have like 5 people, yeah, maybe not. But anything that gets into thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, and has some time to just be there, you're going to have people with extreme views. That's just always how it is. Anything that you support, I can assure you there are people that go too far with that. You're pro-life, you're pro-choice, you're pro-guns, anti-guns, whatever it is that you believe, I can assure you, first and foremost, people might think you're just wrong to begin with, but even within your own group, there are people that support your side of the argument. There are going to be people that are extreme. So with what's happening in Iran, yes, there are going to be some extreme voices and people that say things that you disagree with completely and makes you think, wow, this is just a crazy movement. But no, that could just mean that there are some people always in any group, in any type of movement, that will have extreme views. That's just the way these things go forward. So I say this because I hope we don't get discouraged by things not being as clean as we'd like, as perfect as we'd like, the exact way that we want it to go, and realize, yes, there's going to be diversity and different types of thoughts and feelings. But if we unify and work together, we can get to the ultimate goal, which is replacing this regime or ending this regime first and foremost, and giving Iran back to the people, which is what should be the ultimate result. All right, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. A big thank you to Farid in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Zan Zendegi Azadi.